14% of the US Navy just vanished from the global map. It's now staged off Venezuela, anchored by the USS Gerald R. Ford. Not as an invasion force, but as a precision strike platform. Why deploy a carrier strike group against decentralized cartels? Today, we break down the MAC logic, the action of forward basing, the capabilities that enable targeted hits with minimal collateral, the execution pathways from air wing to drones, and the political effect, deterrence without a land war. If you want to see how overwhelming power pressures a regime without firing a shot, you're in the right place. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. 14% gone from the map.
The country's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, is now in Latin America as the U.S. ramps up its military presence in that area.
And the Ford carrier will bolster, as I said, U.S. firepower in the Caribbean. It brings the total number of U.S. naval assets in the region that we know of to 13.
That ship carries more than 4,000 sailors and dozens of tactical aircraft. And it comes as President Trump has directed the Secretary of War.
A carrier, destroyers, a fast attack submarine. The question hits you first: why bring a supercarrier to a fight with cartels that don't mass armor or fly flags? Start with the action. The line sits off Venezuela, a CVN as the anchor point, escorts space to form a moving wall, and a submarine stalking the deep routes where smugglers think they are safe. The mission isn't landfall. It's options. Options to see, reach, and act in minutes instead of days.
For Pete Hegseth to continue deadly strikes on suspected drug boats in international waters headed for the U.S.
Killing at least 75 people in these strikes and drawing significant criticism, both from Congress and from the international community. Well, Nicole, this really is an escalation of the Trump administration's efforts to build up the U.S. military presence in this region as it ramps up that war on drug trafficking.
The tension is real. Cartels don't hold ground in neat lines. They live inside traffic, river bends, and jungle strips that shift by the hour. They run on motorcycles, fast boats, and rented planes, not battalions. A giant deck looks wrong on the surface. But that mismatch is the method. You bring a sledge when the target hides in rice paper, not to crush indiscriminately, but to force everything fragile to sit still. Capability turns the math. The air wing is a sensor shooter web, not just jets on alert. E-2D builds the air picture and routes shooters onto fleeting tracks. F-35C and F/A-18 fuse what they see with what the fleet knows, then pass clean target quality. MQ-9 from a support ship or Navy drones push long dwell over river mouths and dirt strips. P-8A patrol aircraft widen the dome at sea, sweeping for low-wake hulls and radios that whisper when they think no one is listening. That leads to the chain that matters. Find, fix, finish. Find with overlapping sensors that tag pattern, not just dots. Fix with a fast handoff, track confidence rising as feeds agree.
It comes as it continues those controversial strikes you mentioned on the alleged drug boats. Enhanced U.S. force presence in the U.S. Southcom area will bolster U.S. capacity to detect, monitor, and disrupt illicit actors.
Finish with the right tool: small diameter weapons that punch with limited blast, laser-guided munitions for moving trucks at night, and standoff options when the target rides near homes. You don't flatten the block. You take the axle. Marines at sea close the seam. They sit ready with helos and fast boats for visit, board, search, and seizure runs that end up mothership before it drops off smaller craft. They can ride a special operations mothership to launch teams and drones where the radar horizon would hide them. No land campaign, but hard touches at the key nodes, fuel farms, logistics barges, and the few airstrips that make the rest possible. Deterrence is the quiet engine behind the noise. Research says a visible, survivable, credible force raises the cost of action and shrinks the window for a bad move.
And it was in late October that we heard Secretary Pete Hegseth direct it to leave from its position in the Mediterranean, and it was today that it arrived in Latin America. Since September, we have seen the Trump administration strike at least 19 vessels as part of this fight against drugs. As you said, it has more than 4,000 sailors and dozens of tactical aircraft aboard, so a lot of firepower on that carrier.
A carrier strike group does that by its shape alone, hard to kill, always armed, and watched by everyone. It compresses the adversary's decision space. It signals political will without crossing into occupation. When the other side knows that a launch can be tracked, a rendezvous can be mapped, and a strike can land before the truck crosses town, behavior changes. Execution is where it turns from theater to pressure. A maritime cordon chokes exits. Air tasking orders stack sorties against time-sensitive hits, with deck cycles tuned for quick restrike when a target ducks and reappears 5 minutes later. Joint links tie Navy Air and P-8A calls to Coast Guard cutters that hold the legal keys for seizures and arrests. The submarine shadows deep routes and keeps smugglers wondering which ocean is safe. The Special Operations Mothership extends reach into coves and river deltas, where rotors and ribs lift small teams onto bad hulls in the dark. Tempo is the weapon. You don't need to hit everything. You need to hit fast enough that movement feels risky and planning feels pointless. Overmatch plus precision narrows the roads carts can drive, the slips they can use, the airfields that can accept a night landing. That pressure climbs the ladder, from boat crews to financiers, then to any state backers who now see cost with every mile. So the mismatch is the method. Heavy steel forces a network to slow down. Sensors make hiding expensive. Finely aimed weapons keep the blast radius small while the effect lands hard. Now that you see the method, here's the real question: what political effect does this buy, and how long does the clock run before momentum fades? See Power Pressures Networks. Precision, tempo, visibility. You don't plant a flag, you change choices. A carrier group turns motion into risk, plans into noise, and covert routes into short timers. That's the lever, make every mile feel taxed. So what would you prioritize, long-haul maritime deterrence that holds a steady squeeze, or covert partner-led raids ashore that cut deep at nodes? Comment your choice below and subscribe if you track real force projection. Your call reflects how you think about cost, time, and risk. The next move is political. The flight deck just made it urgent, and the clock won't slow for anyone.